Namaskar. Great pleasure to have with us Professor Dilip Chakrabarti this afternoon to talk to us on a very interesting topic, debates on ancient India. Now, I think one tragedy in our country is that we don't know enough about our own country. And what happens this morning becomes history. So talking about what happened 5,000 years ago and so on. So we are generally very ignorant about ourselves. And I think this needs to be corrected. And of course, that correction has to take place at multiple levels. Firstly, we must respect our history. We must study history. There should be history should get a proper place in our curriculum. And since we are a diverse, plural country with all kinds of historical experiences, what is history and what has been our history, that also becomes a matter of debate. Now, Professor Dilip Chakrabarti is an archaeologist, historian, and you know him very well. He has also been the editor of our Ancient India history volumes, and he has painstakingly brought out, I think now, how many? 7 volumes? 7? No? 7 volumes, and is working on other volumes till about volume 11. And I think that itself has made a tremendous contribution to our knowledge, enhancing our knowledge. And we are extremely happy that he has also been awarded with the Padma Shri this year. So that also is a matter of great honor for us, particularly for the BIF, with whom you have been associated. He comes to India every winter and we have been interacting with him. And his CV is also very interesting, and I'll just read out a few lines from his CVs so that this audience and our younger colleagues particularly know about him. He is presently the Emeritus Professor of South Asian Archaeology in the Department of Archaeology at Cambridge University. And he was the first person to hold professorship in the field of ancient Indian history in Cambridge University. So that's a very important achievement. And before joining the Cambridge, he had tenured appointments at Calcutta, 1965 to 77, Delhi, 1977 to 90, Vishwabharati, 1980 and 81. He's also held visiting fellowships at and teaching appointments at Cambridge University, Edinburgh, Tehran, New York, Paris, Jahangirnagar, Bangladesh, and Armidale, Australia. Being an archaeologist, he has surveyed the Kangra Valley, the whole of Chota Nagpur Plateau, the whole of Ganga Yamuna Plain, and the Haryana Punjab between 1980 and 2008. During this period, he worked out in the field of archaeology of the routes which linked the Ganga Plain with the Deccan and ancient routes of the Deccan and the Southern Peninsula. After his retirement in 2008, he completed a spell of field studies in Rajasthan after retirement. During 63 to 79, he participated in archaeological field projects in India and Iran. Of these field topics and other problems of Indian archaeology, he has authored and co-authored 29 books and co-edited about a dozen more. He is the editor of the VIF series of the history of ancient India. Also, Professor Rao from Delhi University, he has been part of some of our discussions here, and he participated in the in our seminar on Vasudev Kutumbakam, and he's also guided us in some of our work. Thank you very much for being with us here. So now I hand over to Professor Chakrabarti for this talk.
Thank you very much. The modern studies in the history of ancient India began around the middle of the 18th century and are thus about 250 years old. It is but natural that in the course of this long journey, the research trail will pick up many ideas which may not be relevant today. If the study of the subject has to move forward, we should know what are these irrelevant ideas and why we should discard them. I shall pick up three such issues in this essay: the Aryan hypothesis and the related assumption of looking at history through similarities between languages. 2. The extent to which our literary sources can throw light on ancient India's socio-economic and religious developments. And finally, the academic relevance of some frequently used terms such as feudalism, early medieval, state formation, and legitimization in this context. We take up the Aryan hypothesis first. The postulate of the dispersal of Aryan language speakers from their original homeland has been a part of the historical narrative for about 200 years. Despite producing tons of publication, the hypothesis has not produced anything which is archaeology and historically tangible or can be supported by any independent category of evidence. This proves that the attempt to understand the course of history through comparative philological analysis has essentially been futile. Comparative philology may have its importance to linguists, but in historical studies, it does not have any verifiable importance. It is also worth pointing out that comparative philological studies evolved in the pre-Darwinian times when the biblical theory of creation was in vogue. According to this creation theory, all human beings and their cultural elements descended from the sons of Noah, and thus these cultural elements, including their languages, had to be mutually related. So what William Jones and his successors wrote about the similarities between Sanskrit and some other languages was natural in the background of the period when they wrote. Eventually, this hypothesis also resulted in the racial hatred and bigotry of various kinds, including the death of millions of the so-called non-Aryans during the Second World War. It is funny that this hypothesis has been with us for a very long time, certainly for more than 200 years, or about 200 years. How is it that without any tangible evidence of any kind, this hypothesis figures so prominently in our history textbooks? How is it that our school children are being raised on this diet of crazy ideas, completely unacceptable ideas? You do not approach the study of history through a study of the languages. This is as simple as that. Because we often forget the languages can't independently date anything. This is true. This may sound unbelievable, that through a study of the languages you can't date anything. In fact, the so-called structural similarities between different languages don't have any historical premise in the background. Now, a so-called Aryan world is a make-believe world of frequently wild and invariably subjective speculations. Till now, there is not an iota of real evidence that there was a real group of people called the Aryans. As an intellectual exercise, it has always been a myth. People have written about this mythical aspect too. There are books called the Aryan myth. But most of the scholars don't listen to the voice of this minority group of people. All this is well known to people who look for solid, independently verifiable data to write in history. However, what lends a sad dimension to the theme is a still pervading morbid interest in the Aryan concept. Open the pages of history books from the school level onward and you'll realize this yourself. If I may say so, there is a strong and powerful body of scholarship which has coined two new terms to denote the past language situation. Archaeolinguistics, now in use among some modern archaeologists, means basically the same thing as the earlier term comparative philology. What is perhaps more dangerous is the attempt to relate the results of DNA studies to various premises of comparative philology. These premises came in vogue in the 19th century. The fact that the results of such sophisticated biological studies as DNA analysis are openly harnessed to test 19th century linguistic premises may seem unwarranted and pathetic to some. However, the new term is archaeogenetics for this kind of approach to the human past. You showed me a book, this one, and this man has used DNA studies to prove different migrations to India. I have not read the book, but I can get the hang of his logic, the author's logic. In fact, these two terms, archaeolinguistics and archaeogenetics, I thoroughly disagree with the use of these terms. These terms were coined by a very respected colleague of mine in Cambridge University Department of Archaeology, Lord Colin Renfrew. What you've claimed above is true, but the problem is why so many people are still enamored of the Aryan idea. One of the reasons is that having invested so many words on it for so many years, people are reluctant to give it up, possibly dreading the vacuum such a giving up may cause. Logic does not always matter in scholarship, and fanciful theories have always been parts of scholarship in the humanities. Please remember this. In the field of the humanities, logic hardly matters. Secondly, people are unduly obsessed with origins, within quote, although it is not the origin, but the process of development and the nature of function which should matter most in historical scholarships. We make a lot of noise about the origin of Rajputs. Is the issue historically relevant? Do the Rajputs constitute a homogeneous group of people? A very simple question. Then why are you so excited about it? Does it serve any purpose? Except it heightens the sense of division between the Rajputs and the so-called Rajputs and the so-called non-Rajputs. Thirdly, scholars, for some perverse reasons of their own, like to dwell joyously on human differences and hardly bother to ponder over the fact that they are all parts of the same species. This also is true. We always take a lot of delight in emphasizing human differences, not in human unities. It happens all the time. I have a theory. I'm not able to work it out. Maybe someday I should do a book on this. My feeling is that behind all genocides, every genocide, why genocides happen? Because of the perceived differences between human groups. As simple as that. And this feeling has been nurtured, has always been nurtured by the very best in academia. Behind all killings lie a solid bunch of academic crooks. This is true. The last genocide I can think of with a lot of shock is the Rwanda genocide, where many people got killed in a very short time. And the main reason was the perception of difference between the Hutus and the Tutsis, the two groups. One group was brought to believe that they represent the Arab strain in African development, and the other group was normal, black African group. There's a lot of hostility between these two groups for all sorts of reasons, but the academics strengthened this feeling, academic writing strengthened these feelings, and eventually they did not hesitate to kill each other very quickly. So, never take an academic theory particularly seriously about human origins and all that. Now, finally, have Indians considered the simple fact of the diversity of our language groups and the chaos and bitterness it will cause if we endow all these language groups with their own trajectories of cultural and other related developments? Dravidian hypothesis is a convenient example. The hostility between the Dravidian group of languages and Aryan group of languages is also well known in modern India. But do you allow this to be aggravated further by sticking to the old obsolete ideas? In Europe, where people are very casual about using these terms, archaeolinguistics, archaeogenetics, there it doesn't matter. Except in the fringes of Europe, like Bosnia, Serbia, and all those obscure or saying barbaric places, as I say, I mean, these issues don't matter. So in Cambridge, it is all right. You can try to prove yourself clever by indulging all sorts of linguistic hypotheses. You chant some Greek, you chant some Sanskrit, you chant whatever you feel like chanting. And you pat yourself on the back by being a great scholar. But in the backwoods of Europe, people still get killed in the name of these differences. What happened in Kosovo? Only the other day. So, the point is, what will happen in India if we take these so-called language issues very far? You see, till now it is only the issue of the Aryans versus Dravidians. The Austrics have not yet stepped in. The Kohls and the Mundas. They have not yet claimed their share in the growth of Indian civilization. When they begin to do that, and if we continue with these ideas, it will be a very dangerous thing. What happens to Tibeto-Burmans? That is so-called the Mongol, the people along the Himalayan belt. For apparently unidentifiable reasons, the Aryan hypothesis still plays the role of something like creation myth, something which can never be proven, but will still continue to haunt and color our perceptions of ourselves. It is an entirely bizarre and age-conscious world, and it is very unfortunate that a substantial section of the academia is still obsessed with it. With these words of caution, we now turn to the Aryan situation in India, especially its politics in the study of Indian history. In India, the lure of Aryan hypothesis has cut across a wide spectrum of political beliefs. By the second half of the 19th century, when the idea had got consolidated, Indian authors were happy to note that both the Indians and their British rulers had come from the same stock, uniting both the ruler and the ruled into a kind of family relationship. There's a lot of literature on this, and this is all very true. This led to the development of various attitudes among Indians to British rule. The famous economic historian and novelist R.C. Dutt, Ramesh Chandra Datta, actually this is the full name, considered the first coming of Aryans to India a glorious period of Indian history. In some ways, the attitude persisted in the writings of many later scholars. Among the English writers sympathetic to the Indian cause, E.B. Havell, an art historian, was tireless in emphasizing the Aryan character of the British rule in India. The historians of the period, which included R.C. Majumdar and others, who never tired of highlighting the positive achievements of ancient India, accepted the Aryan premise without question. Although they emphasized that Indian culture had developed out of syncretism between its many ethno-linguistic components like the Aryans, Dravidians, etc. An offshoot of this idea was the notion that each language group had its own cultural linkages. For instance, Bengal, being outside the proper Aryan pale, was supposed to have been peopled largely with Austrics, who in their turn contributed many features to Bengali culture. A teacher of mine wrote his PhD thesis on the alpanas of the folk ritual drawings of Bengal, and according to him, the art of these ritual drawings was an Austric contribution to the Bengali culture. Do such assertions or conclusions mean anything substantive? Can we think of cultural contributions of a group of people simply on the basis of language? Can we do that logically? Or could we ever do this logically? You see, there is a famous language man called Sunita Kumar Chakrabarti in Bengal, in Calcutta University, and he used to believe in such theories and he used to write a lot of books on them. One of his famous books is Kirato Janakriti, Kiratos being the Mongoloid people of the northeast and the Himalayan belt. Let's say the people speaking Tibeto-Burman languages contributed these and these items to Indian culture. These scholars were in fact trying to incorporate diverse groups of Indians in the main fold of Indian social and cultural structure by these means. They were well-intentioned exercises, but did they ever mean anything substantive historically? You cannot write any objective history of the group of people called the Austrics or the Kiratas for all sorts of reasons, but the main reason is that all human groups are mixed groups, and it is absolutely impossible to constrict them within narrow limits. This is a very simple point, isn't it? But a point very often forgotten by historians, or even by normal educated people. You can only write the ancient history of the different pieces of your land. You do not write the history of human groups under the assumptions that such groups have a flow of unsullied heritage. In historical terms, it is the land, and possibly the land alone, which matters and sets the stage for human movements in it. The issue of syncretism also had come to assume different forms, some of them plainly political. Suniti Kumar Chatterjee's formulation that the people of the Indus civilization were Dravidian speaking caught on like wildfire in Dravidian South, where the idea, the language of the Indus civilization was Dravidian, is accepted like an axiom. In fact, the idea is so strong in Tamil Nadu that if you criticize this notion in public, apart from, there is every chance that you will get beaten up. No exaggeration. This is pure madness in the name of languages. And believe me, I've examined the evidence. There is not even a scratch of evidence anywhere to say that Indus people spoke a Dravidian tongue, spoke a language, their language was affiliated Dravidian family. In fact, the Aryan hypothesis was severely contested in the South. That is the nicest part, and it was called Dravidian Aryan illusion, forming the intellectual foundation of the political Dravidian movement. On the other hand, Aryanism itself had found a greatly heightened expression in the writings of Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He was a great Aryanist. The postulated link between the Indus civilization and Tamil Nadu is a complete myth, but that has not prevented many Tamilians from being obsessed with it. In the contemporary context, the ardent champions of Aryan hypothesis in India are Western Indologists, who are basically all Sanskritists. Those Indian historians who blindly follow the dictates of Western Indology, and Indian communists of whose writings those by the late R.S. Sharma may be considered examples. There is another group which is anti-communist and aligned to the right, but they hold that instead of migrating towards India, the Aryans migrated to other countries from India herself. According to this group, the validity of the Aryans as an ethno-linguistic identity is undisputed. The difference lies only in the identity of their homeland and the basic direction of their migration. After Bibilal's recent theory of India being the original homeland, you see, they don't accept the Aryan idea itself is a myth, that it is not worth pursuing historically. Whereas most of the scholars, beginning with Western scholars, they hold that the Aryans came to India from outside. These people hold that the Aryans went to different parts of the world from India. And they think that this is a great expression of Indian nationalism. Both are equally disgusting. The whole concept of the Aryans is a myth. There is never any group of people called the Aryans. It's entirely a scholarly reconstruction. This has done great damage to the study of ancient India. Take the case of the Vedic literature. Now, the corpus of the Vedic literature, right from the Rig Veda to Dharma Sutras, it is well connected, it is well linked. It's a cohesive whole. There is nothing in this literature which says it is related to anything in the outside world, right? Anything non-Indian. You can read the Rig Veda or any other text any number of times you like, but if you're a sensible chap, you will not find anything related to West Asia or Central Asia or whatever. Now, once you begin to say these are Aryan texts, once you begin to relate these texts to other parts of the world, if you like to view them in view of the Indo-European literature, then you get totally confused. And this is exactly what has happened in the case of our Vedic literature. Why there are so many interpretations of the Vedas? Why? It's a normal Sanskrit text, should be taken as such. But it is not fashionable to write about anything in the Rig Veda or any Vedas for that matter, or any related literature, without bringing in all sorts of obscure gods and goddesses. The names you may find in some obscure inscriptions in the Middle East, or in Europe, or elsewhere. We think this is very learned, we're being highly scholarly. We are being nothing more than bloody fools. So in our series, we took this very simple line. India of the Vedic texts. We don't discuss Aryans in this series. Actually, there is a chapter which says that why the Aryan idea is not being accepted in the book. But our historical description is based India of the Vedic texts. Now, there is another point. See, the history of India has always been a continuous thing. There is no break anywhere. In the civilization developed, there were so many associated cultures. They had their day, they declined, they were transformed into different sets of cultures. All this is clearly visible. There is no break anywhere. There is no place at all for any incoming ethno-linguistic group in this archaeological picture. This has been known for quite a long time. But once we accept this Aryan, the idea of Aryan coming, things change a bit. You see, the main point is, lots of people have written that Hinduism, for instance, was the result of mix of the Aryans and the non-Aryans, developed only after the Aryans came. Once you do that, Hinduism becomes an immigrant religion. It becomes as immigrant religion as Islam and Christianity are in the context of India. This is the big political game. And some scholars are fairly blatant about it. More than the idea of a break in the Harappan story of archaeological continuity, it is the idea of Hinduism emerging in the wake of the Aryan language migration which holds special appeal to a section of Indologists and historians. To them, tracing back the features of Hinduism to the Indus context, despite clear evidence in its favor, is an unwarranted exercise. Hinduism to them is an immigrant Aryan religion. The implication is that Hindus are as immigrants as any other immigrant religion in India, the Muslim and Christians, for instance. This is downright malicious, and the attitude may be clearly seen in the writings of scholars like Upinder Singh and R.S. Sharma. The latter that is R.S. Sharma, never stopped looking for the Aryans in India, and the former, that is Upinder Singh, is very wary of finding anything reminiscent of Hinduism in the Indus civilization. They have found Shiva in the Indus civilization, complete with cannabis and bhang. But still, according to this bright ancient historian of Delhi University, or is it Ashoka University these days? Indus civilization doesn't have anything to do with Hinduism. It is not that I'm a very devout Hindu, but there it is. It is time that in modern historical research on ancient India, the Aryan theory in all its forms is ignored, and that we try to offer an ancient history of India without taking a recourse to the history of any ethno-linguistic group, hypothetical ethno-linguistic group. In the volumes on the history of ancient India, which have been initiated by the Vivekananda International Foundation, attempts have been made to work out precisely this, and one hopes that this approach will bring about a new perception of the continuity and diversity of human occupations in the subcontinent. The nationalist cause of Indian history is not served by making India Aryan homeland. Our emphasis should be to understand India without Aryans or any ethno-linguistic group of this kind. From the national point of view, this is an important issue. I don't agree with these people who call India the Aryan homeland. Because this will not lead us anywhere. In fact, lots of people have called India an Aryan homeland. But these scholars are as harmful as the ones who say the Aryans came to India from outside. So this is my stand on the use of different ethno-linguistic groups in the study of ancient India. I think that these ethno-linguistic groups are completely irrelevant to the study of history. The notion of ethno-linguistic groups is also a dangerous thing. Lots of people have got killed in the name of ethno-linguistic differences. They get killed most of the time in different parts of the world. Do you really believe in ethnicity? I don't. As a Bengali, I take a lot of pride in my language. At the same time, I am aware that the Bengali, which, say, was being read and understood even 50 years ago, it is not read and understood now by the modern generation. Bhagavatam Chakrabarti's prose or Ishachandra Vidyasagar's prose, they were great people, great literary figures. It will be completely mysterious to the modern children. They don't have any background of Sanskrit. They will not be able to answer the basic meaning of a word. So what is big about ethnicity? What is this big thing about Bengali language, etc.? If you look at it closely, not much really. And I'm sure the same is true of Hindi. If some of you understand highly Sanskritized Hindi, it's good. But how many of them do? There is a reasonably well-known Bengali newspaper called Anandabajar, which I read almost every morning on the internet. 2 minutes on Anandabajar. And my joke is, unless they manage to destroy Bengali language, this so-and-so newspaper will not feel satisfied. So much about ethnicity. Ethnicity is a fluid thing. You can't take your bath in the same river twice. So ethnicity is always in a state of flux. So why attach so much importance to it. Do you know what the modern historians do these days? To examine the notion of identity of various tribal groups, as if there is no other historical issue in modern India. You have to examine the issues of identity of the Boros and other northeast tribal groups. It is political, you see. Unless it can bring an element of cessation, I mean, nobody is going to take you seriously. They held a conference in modern India in Cambridge a few months back, and I knew a young man who attended it. I said, what were the papers which are being read? He mentioned one paper on Boro identity. Why the identity of the Boros should be so important in the academia now? There must be a reason. In any case, I suppose I've made my point very clear. Second issue is, second debate, can we offer an evolutionary picture of socio-economic and cultural developments in ancient India on the basis of our literary texts? How good is our literary evidence as historical material? Now, if you take the Ramayana and the Mahabharata and all the associated literature at their face value, if you feel that Rama really existed, wandered around the earth, or Mahabharata war actually took place in Kurukshetra, I have nothing to say. I would simply say that please don't bother yourself with such mundane thing as history. That's the only request I shall make. But if you are not a great believer like this, if you ask yourself this question, that how far can we go on the back of the literary evidence of this kind? First of all, these texts do not contain much historical evidence. There was a chairman of the Indian Council of Historical Research till recently, and he used to say that we must reconstruct our history on the basis of mythology. You don't reconstruct history with mythology. Now, also, our texts are virtually undateable. You may find it difficult to believe, but it is true. Would you agree with me? Because unless you've got an internal evidence, how can you date a literary text? Unfortunately, our texts don't have any internal evidence of this kind. And whatever evidence there is, it is too general. It gives us a very wide bracket. If you have to reconstruct our socio-economic development, say, satisfactorily, we have to have a more precise dating evidence, precise chronology. We can arrive at different periods, broad periods, but we cannot offer an evolutionary picture. Texts are seldom rich in historical data. I shall give you one concrete example which I remember very well. You see, if you are interested in the history of mines, say in ancient Greece, you will find books written on this purely on the basis of literary evidence, Greek texts. There are texts of this kind there. People who are historically more concerned, shall we put it like this. In India, what you can offer on the history of Indian mines on the basis of our texts, not more than a couple of pages. Forget books. Only a couple of pages. So the texts which have survived in India, they are not very rich in historical data. There may be a good reason for this, because most of our original manuscripts have not survived. We used to write on leaves, Bhurjapatra, or on palm leaf. Manuscripts have not simply survived. There is a vigorous debate about the beginning of writing in India. We found 2 bits of Bhurjapatra from near Allahabad in an archaeological context which is dated around 800 BC. You see, a very circumstantial evidence. But what were these 2 bits of Bhurjapatra doing at Stingberpur near Allahabad around 800 BC? Bhurjapatra is not locally grown. It must have been brought from near Garhwal. Why people of the Allahabad area needed bits of Bhurjapatra around 800 BC? Unless they knew how to write. So even in matters like this, there is no straight, direct evidence. Circumstantial in most cases. People still say that there was hardly any writing in India before Ashoka in the 3rd century BC. This is not true. Writing in India should go back to about 700, 800 BC. Now, so the point I'm making is that our texts are not particularly rich in historical matters. We are not, as a nation, we are not particularly conscious of the importance of history, are we? To quote Bankim Chattopadhyay again, Bankim Babu wrote that he was lamenting the lack of history writing among Indians. He said, even the Sahibs go on hunting a few birds, there'll be history of that. Whereas in India, there have been so many kings, etc., we don't have that history. This is true, we are not historically conscious. Kalo ayam nirabadhi vipulacha prithi. That is the notion. For historians, this is a very bad notion. My third debate relates to the applicability of some terms in the context of post-Gupta period in India. We are concerned with 4 terms here: feudalism, state formation, early medieval, and legitimization. These are frequently used in modern books on ancient history, ancient Indian history in India. And these books are studied widely in our universities. Am I right, Karantesh? The basis of the feudal theory is that between 600 and 1200 AD, India passed through a feudal phase in the European sense. Fine. Its basic evidence consists of a series of land grant inscriptions where the Donis turn into a landowning intermediary class between the king and the peasants. You see, the point is, in the post-Gupta period, roughly from the 6th century AD onward, we find some inscriptions which record donations of land including villages, to Brahmins, right? And these donations are usually made by the royalty or rich people or simply important people on auspicious days after the donors took a ritual bath in the morning. You take a dip in the river, do this, and donate a village or two to a Brahmin of your choice. It is as simple as that. This has always been the case in India. We still do it. Inscriptions like this have had, say, date not merely from the 6th century AD, from this particular period, but also from much earlier periods. The inscriptions of this kind, although not many, from the early centuries AD, from the Satvahana period, and inscriptions of this kind continue right of the 16th, 17th century AD Rajasthan. Because this has been a common Indian way of earning merit, earning virtue. On Chakrabarti days and other days, you take a bath in the river and you donate things. Now, these people, these historians, they're all communists, by the way, they've concocted this idea of feudalism in India. And because that particular group was powerful enough to monopolize jobs in Indian institutions, their theories became very powerful. It is as simple as that. The man who propounded this was the chairman of the ICHR. He was the head of the department, history department, Delhi University, with history jobs in 73 or 80 colleges for history to dispose. So it became a very important theory. All these chaps had to know about this theory in detail.
Who is this?
R.S. Sharma. R.N.P. Singh Saab is smiling, but R.N.P. Singh Saab, that he was a great scholar. I'm sorry to say, Singh Saab, he was not. Now, what about state formation? It happens all the time. Now, you see, there was a time when people used to think that unless the study of the ancient Indian history conformed to the European notions of historical periodizations, it won't be worth much. In fact, primitive communism, slavery, feudalism, then of course capitalism. So Indian history also had to go through these stages. And if your data don't suit you, that hardly matters. You propound your theory anyway. In the case of Rajasthan at least, a term I'm rather unhappy with is state formation in the post-Gupta period, again from the 6th century AD onwards. The argument against it is also very simple. Once the primary states came into existence, long back, in about 800 BC or 600 BC, state formation has always been a continuous affair in India. Right up to the Mughal period. Not far from your own Hazaribagh, General Banerjee, is a small state called Ichhagar. Ichhagar came into existence only the 18th century. Ichhagar state. And all these small tribal states, they were full-fledged states in one sense, because they could trace their genealogy to the Chandra and Surya Vanshas. It's a quite interesting thing. State formation has always been a continuous affair in India, depending on agricultural expansion, depending on the population growth, etc., etc. So to say that that post-Gupta period is important because there is an intense state formation during that period, it is not very convincing. Again, another political term is early medieval. My comment is very crude. It is nothing but a ploy to bring in the Muslim phase of India's historical development as an integral part of Hindu India. Look at the date, 600 to 1200 AD, right? You are calling it early medieval. What is medieval? Later period. And we all know that the post 1200 AD is Muslim India. Once we employ this term early and medieval in relation to these two phases, that you are trying to attach Muslim India to ancient Hindu India, I believe this is a dangerous game. And why should we accept it? By the twist of a term, Muslim India becomes a continuation of Hindu India. Because is that true? I believe in the old divisions, Hindu, Muslim, and British period of Indian history. It's a very straightforward division. The nature of the sources, you see, it differs from period to period. Another term which is being used is, now, I'm just read out one small paragraph. I remember the late R.S. Sharma writing that one must not think of the glories of ancient India because that would upset Muslim Indians. It is true, he wrote this. To him and his camp followers, any talk of Hindu and Muslim periods carried a smell of communalism and thus have to be avoided. Legitimization is another frequently used term to denote links between ancient Indian ruling houses and their Ishtadevatas or primary deities. I've heard this term legitimization very often in the context of Orishan history. Am I right? It must be noted that the development of religious centers and various cult deities was not the result of political forces in ancient India. Jagannath cult did not grow because some Orishan king decided to support it. Its dynasties did not have to take sanction from any religious center or cult spot to legitimize their rule or justify the continuation of that rule. Cult spots grew quite independently of political forces. It was one thing for these powers to go to these religious centers and pray for prosperity and success, but to argue that the deities sanctioned or legitimized the continuity of their rule is against the way the relationship between the political and the religious has been visualized in India. There is no organized church in India. Your Kulke, and now I'm naming the man, may not understand this, but Kulke satellites in your university, Boidovi and others, they should have realized it. It is best to appreciate ancient Indian developments in terms of India's traditional behavior and ethos. The issues that I've pointed out have been propounded since the 1970s. The group of people which propounded them was politically powerful and made other people care uncritically for what they were propounding. It is possible to judge historical assumptions critically once one looks at the political power structure in the background. Writing of history is almost 100% politics. When I write, I make sure that it does not throw any shadow on our nationalist history. Politics. So history writing is mostly politics. And whenever we write a history book, we must ask ourselves this question: why this chap is taking this line? Why? Those of you who come from the hard sciences, they're possibly feeling shocked. In conclusion, I may draw attention to a debate which is currently shaping up. It is true, it is very much there in Delhi now. If a newspaper report is true, October, Economic Times, Indian Council of Historical Research and Indian Council of Philosophical Research proposed to publish a book titled Bharat Vaibhav, or Wealth of India. Basically, this publication would take up the issue of ancient India's advancement in many fields of modern science, including the concepts of black hole, aeronautical engineering, etc. I have got only one simple point. To take the studies of ancient Indian science and technology to a new level, there must be suitable analytical laboratories for the study of material remains and a focused research program. Such laboratories and programs are not easy to come by in modern India. I should be very blunt. When you think of the glories of science and technology in ancient India, we should be ashamed, because after all these years, and after all these CSI laboratories in different parts of the country, there is not a single one which has come up for the study of ancient remains. And there is great scope of doing scientific work on ancient stuff. We think of radiocarbon dates. In 1986 or 87, that was my first and last visit to China. As early as that, China had about 23 radiocarbon laboratories. And the only laboratory then we had in India, Physical Research Laboratory, Ahmedabad, it was struggling with it. So that is the correct picture. Now, if you come across any old chap saying gleefully about advancement in science and technology in ancient India, take him to be an idiot. Straight away. Now, I suppose I've taken a lot of your time, but I do hope that I've tried to give you a more or less interesting picture of the so-called debates in the study of ancient India. Thank you.